You are listening to Topic Paranormal with your host, Georgina Holzmeyer, and the Paranormal Brain Trust, Robert M. Brown, Nick Landy, and Rachel Sosa. Topic Paranormal covers Paranormal Talk, Paranormal Tales, Paranormal Training, and so much more. Experience the topics of conversation on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Topic Paranormal. Have a topic suggestion or a question? Send an email to topicparanormal@gmail.com or post it to the Topic Paranormal Facebook page. Topic Paranormal is part of the Astronet Radio family. Visit astronetradio.com for more awesome podcasts. And now, your host, Georgina Holzmeyer.
Hello and welcome to Topic Paranormal. Tonight's guest is Nick Landy. Hey Nick, say hello to the listeners.
Hello, listeners.
Hey, I've got a couple of questions for you. One of the things I want the listeners to know for sure is that you're part of my Paranormal Brain Trust. And this is a group of people, the Brain Trust is, of individuals that I have a lot of faith and I feel like they've got credibility. I've experienced investigations with them. This is a group that I go to for my paranormal discussions and bouncing ideas off of and reviewing evidence and things like that. So Nick, give me a little idea, as well as the listeners. Tell us a little bit about why you got into the paranormal, a little bit about your first experience. Just go for it.
All right. Well, I have been interested and intrigued by the paranormal since I was 6 or 7 years old. That's about the time I had my first experience. I lived in a 2-story house here in Marlin, Texas, where I'm from, with my family. And the upstairs of this house was a little more ominous, I guess you could say, than the downstairs. Definitely had a different feel to it. Of course, I can speak about thresholds and different energy levels now after being an investigator for several years. At that time, I had no idea, what was going on as a kid. My first experience came when I was 7. I was upstairs playing in the upstairs room. Now, the upstairs room of this house was a little bit different than most. You walked up 2 flights of stairs, and then there's a hallway. You go down the hallway. On the right-hand side, I believe, was my aunt's room. On the left-hand side was a bathroom, and then the second door on the right-hand side, I believe, was my sister's bedroom. And then you go into this big opening, this big square opening, and it's surrounded by windows.
So it's kind of like a sun porch type situation with windows?
Kind of. It's closed in, it's walls, but there's just windows all around, and there's I don't know exactly what you call it, but there's the seating around all the windows.
Oh, okay.
As well.
How cool, little window benches where you can sit and read in the sunlight or whatever.
Right,
okay.
And underneath the seats were cabinetry to store things. The interesting thing about that was when we first moved into the house, off on a little tangent here, but when we first moved into the house, not just myself, but other members of my family could just smell cigarette smoke upstairs.
Now, did any of your family members smoke at this point in time?
No, nobody in my family was a smoker, or at least nobody that lived with us was a smoker. And all the smokers in the family were relegated to stay outside because none of us smoked. So we couldn't figure it out. Eventually, we just started opening these cabinets and pulling stuff out from underneath, and there were 3 or 4 ashtrays, the tall, standing, antique-looking ashtrays that we came across one day, or that my dad came across one day while he was up there digging around. As soon as we removed those, the smoke smell went away. And I'm not saying it was leftover smoke smell, like it was. You would go into a house of a smoker and it's you would smell it because it stained the walls and permeated into the furniture and stuff like that. It was like fresh smoke smell, like
someone just lit one,
like
just
someone
finished
just
one up.
lit one up.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. And that stopped instantly after we took the ashtrays out of the house. So,
what considerate spirits? At least they needed an ashtray to smoke, right?
I guess so. It was definitely different. I didn't really understand what my parents were talking about at the time when they said it was possibly a spiritual haunting or whatever the terminology they used was going on. But I thought it was a pretty neat story. I guess technically that's my first experience, but my first personal experience, I was up in this room playing with some of my old action figures, G.I. Joe, Ninja Turtles, something like that, one of those nerdy things. And this is where my friends and I went often to play when they were over at the house. So one of my buddies just left for the day, and I was up there by myself at this point. The rest of my family was downstairs. I just remember sitting there in the middle of this room, this big, huge room, playing, and all of a sudden I get this cold chill. Now, let me give you a little context on this real quick. It was the middle of August, summer in Texas.
Okay, so there's no intentional cold breeze coming through.
So there's no intentional cold breeze coming through. None of the windows were open. I remember that vividly because they hardly ever opened the windows upstairs. We didn't have an AC unit upstairs. And the only ceiling fans upstairs were the ones that were in the bedrooms. So to keep cool in that big room, sometimes we would turn on box fans or stand fans, stuff like that. We didn't have any of those in there going at the time. So there was no, going back in my mind, there was no logical explanation for this cold breeze coming through.
Now, give me an idea, were you like sitting and this cold breeze came from behind you, or did it just waft across your forehead?
It came from behind me. I initially felt it on my back and my neck, and then it went forward in front of me. So I was facing the windows, the front windows on the house. The stairs were behind me, and that's where the breeze came from.
Okay.
From where the stairs would have been. So that was the first thing that kind of, I guess, creeped me out, I guess you could say, at that moment. It went away. I didn't think anything of it. I went back to playing, and then I felt it again, but this time it came from my right side. I could feel it on my right arm and blow the other direction. Going back and thinking, breezes don't do that. They don't go one direction and then turn around and come another direction.
Not inside a closed room like that. Definitely not.
Right. So after that, I kind of looked to my left where I feel like the direction of the breeze went. And out of the corner of my eye, I could see like this, I don't even know what to call it. It was a mist, a shadow, something just like floating there. It's like,
so it was definitely darker than the environment around it, is what you're saying.
Right. And all the windows were open. The blinds were up on most of the windows. So the sunlight was shining into the room.
Wow. That's a lot of sunlight in August in Texas, by the way.
Yeah, definitely. So I see this thing just sitting there, just kind of stagnant, just kind of floating. And it startled me to the point where I jumped up, real quick. And then as soon as I jumped up, it went away. Like, okay, interesting. Thinking back, very interesting. My 6-year-old brain, of course, didn't know how to process it at the time. 6, 7, however old I was. So it was in that range somewhere. So I sat back down like any 7-year-old would, I guess, and started playing back with my action figures. Whatever it was gone. It wasn't bothering me anymore. But then I could hear my name, like a faint, like, Nicholas.
Oh, wow. And so it was using your whole name, not just Nick or a shorter version.
Right. Well, my family all call me Nicholas. Okay. So I rarely go by Nick inside the household with my family. So it definitely knew me by my full name, Nicholas. So after I heard my name, I looked behind me thinking, okay, my aunt, my sister, somebody is up here joking around with me. I got up, I went to the bathroom, I went into my sister's room, my aunt's room. Nobody was upstairs with me. Like, okay. So I sat back down, and I just sat there. I was done playing. I just sat there, and I heard it again.
Now, were any of your family members in the house, but like downstairs in a different room?
They were in the house, so I remember vividly where everyone was. My dad at the time was a truck driver, so he was out on one of his runs, so he wasn't around. But my grandma and my mother were both downstairs in the kitchen making preparations for dinner. My aunt and my sister were out in the backyard, and they were sunbathing. We're talking about the early to mid 90s here, so they had the old fold-out lawn chairs with the silvery mirror-looking stuff, or the tinfoil, whatever they were using.
Getting gorgeous.
They were out there doing their thing, and they had the big old gray boom box sitting in between them. I remember that, and it was probably playing Def Leppard or something like that on it. So they were outside. Like I said, my buddy had gone. He wasn't in the house anymore. So after hearing my name twice, I got up, I get ready to leave. I start going towards the steps, and all of a sudden now I could feel like a presence behind me. And at this point, I'm getting scared because this presence that was behind me did not feel generous. Thinking back, it did not feel generous. So the further I start getting toward the stairs, the more this presence starts to creep up behind me. So at this point, I take off down the hallway. I get to the first landing of stairs, and I just hear a stop, just like that. So I stopped. I froze.
Now, was this the same voice as the voice that was calling your name earlier?
Going back, I couldn't tell you. It definitely was. It was not anybody that I recognized voice. So it could have been. I'm not going to say it was or it wasn't. I can't think.
It's hard to say.
It's hard to say. So I stopped. I froze. And then I said, nope, I'm going downstairs. So I take off down the first flight of stairs, and you hear this footsteps now behind me, like this. And I'm not talking about gentle footsteps. I'm talking about, it sounded like an elephant was in the room with me. I mean,
like they're pounding down the stairs.
Yes, thudding footsteps. So I get down to the bottom, and these footsteps, I guess you could say they're kind of running or charging at this point. And I get down to the bottom of the stairs, to the landing, to the washroom, which is what it was. It was the kitchen, and you open that door, and it goes into the washroom where the stairs were that led upstairs, and then there was the back door. So I get down to the washer and dryer, and to the right was the entrance to the kitchen. To the left was the entrance was the back door going outside. So the first thing I do is I start banging on the kitchen door. I couldn't open it. It wouldn't open, so I start banging on the kitchen door. And at this point, I'm crying. I'm a 6-year-old kid. I feel like somebody's chasing me. So I'm literally tears. Apparently nobody hears me, so I go over to the back door, and I'm banging on the back door to the backyard. My sister and my aunt can't seem to hear me.
Oh, wow.
So,
I hate to interrupt, but I've got to move on into commercial break here. We'll come back in just a moment, and we're going to find out, did Nick ever get where he needed to go? Thank y'all so much. Tune back in just a moment.
Once upon a time, Christmas was not just about presents and spending money. Once, it was about family, memories, love, and finding a certain magic in the holiday season. At Merry Christmas Texas Walk-Through Light Park, we believe the magical memories are still there. Just slow down and find them. That's our goal. No rush, no fuss. Come spend the evening with us in a beautiful light park. Watch an outdoor movie, sing Christmas karaoke, meet Santa, and so much more. Check it out on toursoftyler.com. Or just come on out, 15926 Highway 64 East in Chapel Hill, about 3 miles past the Chapel Hill High School. $10 for adults and people 13 years and up. $5 for kids 10 to 12 years. Kids 9 and under are free. Merry Christmas, Texas Light Park, making memories to last a lifetime.
I drink Dr. Pepper, don't you see? 'Cause it's the perfect taste for me. That original taste, you know, is making peppers everywhere peppers, cooking peppers, good-looking peppers. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Us peppers are an interesting breed. An original taste is what we need. Ask any pepper and he'll say, only Dr. Pepper tastes that way. There's carrying peppers, marrying peppers, diet peppers, quiet peppers. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? There's saluting peppers, tooting peppers. I'm a pepper man. Wouldn't you like to be a pepper too? Being a pepper, dream Dr. Pepper. Aye, aye. Being a pepper, dream Dr. Pepper. Yes, sir. Being a pepper.
Who goes there?
Is the fickle witch in currently?
No, she's at the gynecologist. Catch her Wednesday night at 8 o'clock on The Brood. That's where you'll find the fickle witch.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Get lost, punk.
But the fickle witch.
Hey, this is Jericho McAgnus of Paranoia Taxes, and you're listening to astronetradio.com, because you got good taste.
Welcome back, and thank you for sticking around. We are with Nick Landy, one of the members of our Paranormal Brain Trust. He's sharing with us his story on his very first paranormal experience. Nick, when we dropped off for a commercial break, you were trying to get out. You had already tried 2 doors that weren't working. Your family wasn't seeing you. Let's pick up. How does this go?
All right. Well, at this point, neither door is opening for me, and nobody seems to hear me banging and crying on the doors. So I'm frightened. I'm scared. The only other way I could go is back upstairs, and I'm not going back upstairs at this point. I don't know what's going on up there. So I try one more time, one last ditch effort. I go back to the kitchen door. I start banging on it again, and my grandma finally, I guess she heard me, or she was coming into the washroom for something, one of the two, opens the door, and I just fall to my knees into the kitchen crying. And the only words I could muster out were, I got trapped, in this crying 7-year-old voice. And so they're just sitting there thinking, oh, he got locked into the washroom, and didn't know what to do. They didn't know all this other stuff had gone on. And at the time, I was just upset, so I wasn't even going to try and explain what had happened. And I never did. I never told the story until I started investigating a few years ago, officially investigating a few years ago. And I told y'all a little bit of the story. I didn't really go into full detail of it. I just said I had my first paranormal experience in this house that I used to live in as a kid, and I said a little bit about it, and that was it. So this is really the first time I've gone into full detail about the whole thing publicly.
Oh, wow. So Mom and Dad are going to be a little surprised when they tune in, huh?
They're going to be a little surprised. They knew a little bit about it, but they didn't know the whole story. And funny enough, even though I didn't explain the story to them then, it wasn't a few weeks later that we actually ended up moving out of the house anyway. So
now that wasn't due to paranormal activity necessarily, though, was it? Or was it?
They say it wasn't, but the fact that everybody that lived there and everybody that visited often all experienced something in that house, I personally think it played into it a little bit.
Okay. Well, and that brings up a question. I had an experience at a young age as well. Was my first experience. And I lived in a house where we didn't talk about paranormal. That was all demons and bad stuff. We just didn't do it. As well as at 11, I didn't know a whole lot about paranormal anyway. But my family certainly didn't talk about it. And I don't feel like I have any psychic gifts necessarily. I definitely know my parents don't. What is your family situation like that in that particular house growing up? Did you feel like your parents had abilities, or did y'all even talk about the fact that paranormal activity existed?
We talked about it. I remember the conversations frequently about the experiences they each had while we lived there. So the topic was out there.
Oh, good.
It was a discussion. My parents didn't hide it. My sister, my aunt, my grandma didn't hide it. And that's who all I lived in the house with at the time. It was myself, my mother, my father, my sister, who's older, my older sister, my aunt, and my grandma.
Okay. Well, cool. So that's great. I always like hearing these first stories because usually they're very pivotal in our development as investigators.
Right.
It's like you don't forget any details. Usually they're pretty solid on that. So let's move into why, considering how scary your experience was in particular, why are you in the paranormal? Obviously it didn't scare you off of the topic.
Right.
You did come back to it, and now we're investigating. And you're a pretty fearless investigator from my experience. So tell us a little bit about what motivates you to do the investigations.
I think the biggest part of my motivation is that there are unexplained things that we can't necessarily see or hear all the time out there. And I want to not necessarily prove that, but I want people to be aware of what's going on. No, it didn't scare me away at all. There's actually not much that I'm afraid of. Rats, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that at a later podcast.
Well, I think we discovered a little earlier frogs aren't your thing either.
Frogs aren't really my thing either, but we can talk about all that at a later date. But yeah, there's not a whole lot that frightens me. You're right about that. I've been watching horror films from an early age, so I'm pretty immune to it all. I don't really know how to explain what kept me into it or why I'm still doing it today. It's part of my life. It's part of who I am personally. I have a connection to this world, so to speak. So I'm still here. I'm still doing it.
Awesome. And I'm glad you are, because it's quite a bit of fun. There's always an adventure involved when we're investigating together.
Absolutely.
Well, let's move into a little bit about, you've been officially investigating for the past 3 years based on our conversations. Give me an idea what officially means to you there versus what's the other alternative? Unofficially?
When I say officially, I mean actually going out with equipment, trying to capture EVPs and video and photo evidence and stuff like that. Unofficially for years prior, I would go to places and I would just kind of walk around myself or with one or two other people and try to get a feel of the location, see if anything popped out and grabbed me or scared me or, something like that. When I say officially, I do mean, actually trying to capture evidence and stuff like that. It kind of tapered off for a while. I got out of it for a little bit. When I was a kid and in my early teens and everything, I was all about trying to do something with it when I got older. When I got into my 20s, for one reason or another, I had a disconnect. And I just, oh, no, that can't be real. That couldn't have happened. Skepticism started to kick in. And I can't remember or recall when it was that skepticism turned back into full-on belief. I think it was roughly around the time that my grandmother passed away. And I recall having another, I don't want to say event, an experience around that time that got me back into it. But definitely my involvement down here at the Palace Theater, where we're broadcasting from now, has definitely got me back into it as well. So
this place is amazing. Speaking as an investigator, I've been investigating this particular location for a little over 6 years now. And we are at the Palace Theater in Marlin, Texas. And if you will stay tuned to our Facebook page, listen into our podcast, you will have an opportunity sometime in the very near future to participate in an investigation here. one of the things that I've really enjoyed about this location is the consistency of the activity. It's so rare to find a place that you can almost count 100% on catching at least one EVP having an experience. Every time. They've never disappointed here at the Palace. So we'll talk about that a lot more. You're going to hear that a lot. That is one of my favorite locations. I love this place. And I know you do too.
Oh yeah, this is, I have at this point in my life, I have such a deep connection to this building, and it's not going away anytime soon. I've been actively involved in the theatrical productions here, the events that we hold here for the better part of 20 years, maybe a little over 20 years at this point. So most of my life, I'm 35 now, so I've been down here for 20 years of that. And I don't see that stopping anytime soon. So many of the individuals that have come through the theater have been a big part of my life in and out of the theater. So I definitely have a connection to this place that is probably never going to be severed.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your role here. I believe you are on the board, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Give us a little idea about what the board does, because I know when we do the Paranormal University here at the theater, the money that we collect from the people that come to investigate, that actually goes back into the theater and renovating it and keeping it up and going, correct?
Correct. Yes, we are a not-for-profit organization here. Everything that we do, the dinner theater productions that we put on, the paranormal investigations that we open up to people, we have style shows, casino nights, everything along those lines. Every bit of money that we bring in goes back into renovating the theater and keeping it up and running. This theater is 95 years old, and it's a very historical building. It's one of the oldest buildings in Marlin, I believe. Possibly Falls County area, and we want to keep it up and running. So the board of directors, basically, we own the theater. The theater is owned by the board of trustees, by the board members. So we're in charge of keeping it up and running.
That is awesome, and for us as paranormal investigators, that's really important because if there weren't people like Nick on the board that understood the importance of the investigations and that cohesive relationship, if you will, we would lose the opportunity to continue these investigations. It's like I said, we've noticed quite a bit of increase in activity as we've been investigating for years now. It's always a consistent place. And so, like I said, stay tuned. Keep up with us. We will let you know when the next Paranormal University is. I think it's probably going to be sometime in January. Is that right?
Right.
Okay. So we're going to move into commercial break here in just a second. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Nick about his psychic abilities, his mediumship gift. We'll get him to explain a little bit more about what he thinks about that. And we're going to talk as well about how he's developing that, and maybe he can share some tips with you as well. So stay tuned. We'll be back in just a moment.
The East Texas Veterans Alliance is proud to present Dancing Among the Stars, a one-night event happening on November 15th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at the Tyler Rose Garden Building, located at 420 Rose Park Drive. Tickets are $40 for singles and $75 for couples in advance, but prices will go up at the door. All proceeds go to providing much-needed scholarships for children of American veterans. Come out and have a great time and know that you are supporting one of the most noble causes of our time, the continued education of our children, which ensures a better future for us all. Call 903-747-8007 for more information. That's 903-747-8007. We'll see you there.
Massage by G creates soul-soothing massage Tailored massage fusing Swedish shiatsu and deep tissue techniques with hot stones and aromatherapy to achieve soul-restoring relaxation. Schedule online at www.amassagebyg.com. We look forward to creating your soul-soothing experience.
He's smart, funny, and very good looking, but he won't let it go to his head.
Out of all my stunning attributes, it's my humility that makes me perfect.
I'm sexy and I know it.
He's Thor, and he's hosting the new show Thornication, Tuesday nights at 8 o'clock, only on astronetradio.com.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is a public service announcement from the On Air Decency League. We have to do a warning about a show that's been airing on astronetradio.com called Plausible Deniability. This show is filth. Some people think it's funny, they think it's hilarious, but it's got language, it's got situations, and quite frankly, it's making me sick. Okay? You don't need to let your kids listen to it. You need to lock up your wives. You need to make sure no one gets out and listens to this. Do not tune in Saturday night at 9 p.m. or Monday night at midnight, or especially not Wednesday night at 10 p.m. Please, for the sake of decency, don't listen to this show.
You're listening to astronetradio.com, and I'm completely naked.
Hello and welcome back. We are still visiting with Nick Landy, one of the Paranormal Brain Trust. Let's move into a little conversation about your gifts. I've been referring to you as a psychic or a psychic medium. Why don't you describe it from your point of view for our listeners? What are your gifts? How does it work? Let's talk about it.
Okay. So my gifts are fairly new to me. That's not to say that they haven't been there for a very long time. In fact, thinking back on some things that have happened in my past, especially when I was a child, it's very well possible that they could have been there. And it's one of those things that I've shut off in my mind and opted to ignore for one reason or the other for all the years that I've been here. But for me, it's fairly recent. I just started getting to where I could see images within the last month or so.
Oh, wow, that is very recent.
Very recent. Before that, it was sounds coming in, and I would say that would be the last, maybe year, I would say, probably.
And when you say sound, are you referring to actual audible words like a spirit talking to you? Or is it more like, random sounds, a train or an automobile or something like that?
It could be anything. Sometimes it's a voice. Sometimes it's a random sound like a TV playing when my TV in the house is off. It could be a train or a car or a motorcycle or something like that going by when there's no traffic on the road. It could be anything along those lines. And before the sound started to pick up, I would say within the last 2 to 3 years, it's all been dreams. And it's still, for me, it's very heavy in dreams, in dream state, definitely in meditative state. I feel like I'm on the cusp of that psychic mediumship that you're referring to. I know I'm not there yet. Like I said, it's only been a few years that I've started experiencing these things. So I've got a long ways to grow in it, but I think the fact that I'm accepting of it now, whereas before I would pick up on something here and there and ignore it and put it in the back of my mind and dismiss it, I probably could be a lot stronger in my abilities had I not ignored it for so long. But yeah, it's for me, it's still new. It's still fresh.
I find it interesting that you mention officially starting to investigate roughly 3 years ago. And that happens to be about the same time that you started accepting and recognizing your psychic ability. Would you agree with that?
I would agree wholeheartedly with that. For me personally, I believe it has to do with a connection with other people as well. And that's about roughly the time that you yourself and Rachel, one of the other brain trusts, came into my life. And I have often referred to y'all as my para-mentors. Which is that phrase is TM. You can't use it. It's mine. No, I'm just kidding. You can use it if you want. But, as my para-mentors, y'all have, I believe, helped me increase that level of psychic activity as well. Just having that connection to y'all.
And I would agree with that. In my opinion, part of that communication is a connection that you can make with living people so that connection is actually transferring into the other world on the other side of the veil, however you want to put that.
Right.
And what I have noticed is when the three of us are together, you, myself, and Rachel Sosa, who y'all will be hearing from in one of the next episodes or two. She is awesome, but we'll get into her later. This is Nick's story today. It's kind of like an amplifier. The three of us together, and I don't have any abilities, okay? I got a little sensitivity, a little intuitiveness. I am not a psychic. I'm not a medium. I'm just me. But there's something about my energy field, I think, that contributes and kind of pumps up that gift that you and Rachel both have. And I see clearer, stronger communication with the spirits. They respond so much stronger. It's just awesome. So it's interesting that you bring up people and that connection for the living. That's definitely going to be another topic on a future show, is how living people can screw up an investigation more than one way. I promise.
Yes.
We'll get there.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about how you're working and developing that gift of yours.
A lot of meditation. Finding the ability to relax. And when I say relax, I mean just sitting there, grounding yourself, forgetting about everything, no matter how hard that might be, especially if you have a lot of issues, say at work or in your personal life, at home, with family, whatever it is. Just grounding yourself and finding that space where it's just you and God or whoever it is that you pray to and worship in the spiritual world, crossing that veil, so to speak, like you just mentioned.
Now, when you're talking about meditation, do you have a particular mantra that helps put you into that relaxed state? Do you listen to a particular music? Are you working with crystals? How do you get there?
For me, it's actually white noise or ambient sounds. When there's a thunderstorm brewing going on outside and I'm not at work or I don't have anything going on, I oftentimes will shut everything in the house down, and I mean everything. I will unplug the TV, the radios will go off, all the lights possible will go off. I will just be there in complete silence, and I will listen to the rain outside, and it will help me connect.
Oh, that's awesome. I hear that for a lot of people, nature and being in nature with those ambient sounds definitely do it for them. And then others, they want a recording or a particular type of music. And that's another show topic in the future, the binaural audio beats. Awesome. But we'll get to that later. Now, are you reading any books? Are you participating in any classes? Are there any exercises that you focus on?
I'm not participating in any classes right now. I have read some books that have been given to me by y'all, actually, that have helped out. Don't ask me titles of books. I tend to forget what the titles are.
I'll look those up and put them on the, we'll get them figured out.
We can get them out there for you in a future podcast or post them on the Facebook page or whatnot. Music helps out a lot for me too. But actually, and this is going to sound odd to some people, yoga really helps me get into that relaxed state. and it makes my body feel better. I initially started doing yoga to help out with my high blood pressure issues and the soreness that I get from work. I'm on my feet 40 to 50 hours a week in retail, so you can imagine the strain that puts on my body, especially my legs and my back. So I got into yoga for those main reasons, and then actually started to see that there's a connection between the relaxation that yoga brings and the spiritual world as well.
Oh,
so
yes.
For me, it's a lot of ambient noise, music, meditation, and yoga.
Oh, cool. Well, appreciate those tips. Now, here's a question for you that you may not have had before. What is your goal for your gift? Is there a particular point that you will reach and know that you're like done with it? Or what's your next step? What's that growth look like for a psychic?
That's interesting that you bring that up, because I've been thinking a lot lately about what I want to do as an investigator and what I want to do with these gifts that are potentially growing within me. And my main driving factor I've come to discover is I just want to help people. I think that now that we go back in our earlier conversation, I think that may be the driving factor behind me staying in the paranormal, is that I want to help people.
And when you say help people, are you talking living people or the spirit people?
Both.
Okay.
You know, I want to be able to help a spirit that may be trapped, that may be here, that doesn't want to be here. I want to be able to help them move on. And I have to develop those gifts in order to make that happen.
I love that you want to help people with these gifts you've got. I'm real curious. I know you started out initially with kind of random sounds, and now you're seeing pictures. So give me an idea. What does the next step of growth in your gift look like? What are you anticipating that is?
It's kind of one of those things where I sort of maybe can guess, but I'm not 100% sure. I think it could be more imagery instead of just pictures and glimpses of things, possible actual stories unfolding, if that makes any sense. Like maybe sort of a video playing in my head or something, like a home movie or something like that.
Versus the individual clips that you're currently getting?
Right. I don't know why I get that feeling or why that thought pops into my head, but that seems to be the trend. I went from images and dreams to actual audible sounds in my regular everyday woken life, to images now in both dreams and in regular normal everyday woken life. So I would say what's coming is more of a pronounced imagery, so to speak. More detail.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, we're going to move into another small commercial break. We'll be right back. When we come back, we're going to ask Nick a question. I sent a little message through the other side, and I want to see if it actually came through. This will be fun. Hang on, and you'll find out.
I'm anxious always. With the Crystal Coffin's smooth herbal blends for energy, anxiety, and more, and Wake the Dead's luxurious bath and body creations, my third eye and my physical vessel are both taken care of. You can find them both on Facebook at The Crystal Coffin and at Wake the Dead Scrubs, and on Instagram at The Crystal Coffin and at Wake the Dead Scrubs.
When you say but, you've said a lot of things nobody else can say. When you say but, you've gone as far as you can go to get the very best. When you say but, you've said the word that means you like to do it all. When you say but, it means you want the beer that's got a taste that's number one. When you say but, you tell the world you know what makes it all the way. When you say but, you say you care enough to only want the king of beers. There is no other one. There's only something less You've said it all.
There is no other one. There's only something less. Because the king of beers is leading all the rest. When you say Budweiser,
You've said it all.
when you say Budweiser,
You've said it all.
The Dark Crystal. A struggle between good and evil. A journey to the far reaches of your imagination. And beyond. Join in the struggle to possess the Dark Crystal. The Dark Crystal, rated PG, starts Friday at a theater near you. Check newspapers for local details.
Are you tired of your everyday run-of-the-mill hip-hop station that only plays what they want you to hear?
Hell yeah.
Tired of all the censorship and all the we can't say this and we can't talk about that?
Bleep, bleep.
Then make sure you tune into the Speakeasy. There's no caps, there's no limits, there's no shut-ups, there's no peeps. Hip-hop that is fine.
Raw and uncut. The Speakeasy.
Well, this is the people's station, not the corporate station.
Speakeasy.
Hot topics, good music.
The Speakeasy. Live Friday at 5.
The rabbit hole to the underground.
Swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. Astronet Radio? Oh, yeah.
Hey, thanks for sticking around, guys. Okay, so here's the question. And just to give you a little idea of where this comes from, whenever I head to an investigation, I pull out one of the apps on my phone and I start communicating kind of like a prelude, trying to find out, hey, who am I going to run into? Give me some direction with some of the questions we'll be asking, things like that. And so this morning, as I headed down here to Marlin, I reached out to the spirit world and said, hey, I have a question. I want you to ask Nick what is sitting in my car in front of my radio screen. My car stereo screen. I've got a couple of little items there. They're kind of like little tokens for me, confirmational items. And so this is just a fun experiment. There is an answer, but they may not have told Nick. You never know what kind of mood they're in. They may also just be like, yeah, Nick thinks this, but we're going to do that. You never know.
Right.
So, Nick, what are the two items in my car sitting by the radio screen?
Oh, gosh. The two items in your car sitting by the radio screen. Honestly, nothing's coming to mind right now. I do have a word reverberating in my head right now. I don't know if it means anything to your situation or if it means something to something else. But the word juniper keeps popping up.
Juniper.
Yes, an interesting word.
It is. Juniper berries. They've been quite a bit of topic for discussion at my household recently.
Oh, okay.
In fact, one of the places I've been doing massage actually has juniper branches. Juniper is a type of cedar, okay? And so it's that season. They've decorated with that, and I love them. They are so cool looking. And then a juniper berry you can actually use in cooking. It's a great spice. It's very flavorful.
Okay.
Also happens to be one of the main ingredients in gin, which, yes, is one of my favorite alcohols. So there's some pertinent things there.
Okay.
The actual items are snail shells.
Okay.
And I'll definitely show you those when we leave. One of the things I find interesting about the psychic gift, when you spend a lot of time in the same circles, you tend to get that psychic connection anyway. So it makes these kind of questions really hard to come up with.
Right.
Because you kind of get that general knowledge. And so that's interesting. They didn't give you that, but they gave you juniper berry.
Juniper. Yeah, and just to reiterate, I personally don't even know what juniper berries are, so the fact that word just popped in my head like that, Georgina and I have never talked about juniper anything, just to let you all know. So that is interesting that's what came up into my head right now.
So that's another fun, interesting thing to talk about with psychics and mediums. The gifts, they are authentic. I do believe people have them. Now, Nick, what's your opinion on, does everybody have psychic abilities, or are you born with it or not?
I've read in some of the material that's been passed along to me that everybody has that ability to grow a psychic connection amongst other people, at least for sure. I'm not too sure about the spiritual world. I couldn't tell you. But from what I've read from a scientific standpoint, everybody has that psychic link to one another. It's just a matter of how much effort you yourself put into it. Do you block it out of your head like I did for almost a decade, or do you openly accept it and do what you need to do in order to grow it?
I would agree with that. My thought process has grown and changed quite a bit on this topic over the years. I kind of grew up with psychics are bad, it's all of the devil. You can tell that my background was obviously very religious growing up. I think those kinds of things also influence how accepting an individual is of those gifts. I don't know. Just one of my random thought processes there. The other thing with those gifts as well is I see people that are psychic. I know they have the abilities. I've seen them demonstrate them. And yet at the same time, they're pretty pushy. And so because of that, I don't want to interact with them. I've seen people who do have abilities that don't advertise it, and they're a little easier to interact with. Do you have a take on that, Nick?
I feel like anybody that has these abilities that pushes them on you, or that pushes the responses or whatever they get on other people, is almost like somebody pushing their religion on you. It can be unwanted, especially if a person does not believe in the same thing that you believe in. I am not of that nature. I'm not going to be pushing anything on anybody anytime soon, but I will speak if I get a message. I will let people know, and then what they do with that information is up to them.
There you go. So it goes back once again to being a responsible individual. You'll hear that a lot from us here at Topic Paranormal. We don't believe in bullshit. We'll point it out when it happens, and we think everyone should be responsible for themselves. So next question. With these gifts, because I know when you and I first started investigating together, we used a lot of equipment, a lot of technology.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about your transition, because now, especially as we get into these Gansfeld experiments, and I can't wait, we're probably not going to have time to talk about those today, but we're definitely going to do a whole show on those. But give me a little take on your progression there.
I have begun to stray away from technology more so. And I used to be a big tech nerd, big tech geek. I always had to have the latest video game console, or the latest handheld device, or the latest camera, or this and that. And I'm not like that anymore. As I've grown older, I've gotten away from those sorts of types of technology. But now as I've grown as an investigator, I've started to get away from a lot of the technology as well. And that's not putting any of the technology that investigators use down, not by any means. I think it's all cool. I think a lot of it can get you accurate responses, and accurate evidence can come through. But as far as technology, for me, pretty much these days, I use a tape recorder and headphones and a white noise machine, and that's pretty much it. Well, besides my Mel meter that has the REM pod attachment, and we'll talk about that later. At later times too. I still use that piece of technology because it's gotten me some very interesting responses lately. But for the most part, I use me. I use myself. I'm not going to say I'm a tool, because that comes out wrong. But I am my own instrument as far as investigating goes. And that's something that Rachel and Georgina have taught me over the last few years, is to be more trusting of my abilities, the way I feel when I walk into a building, the words that sometimes reverberate in my head, much like Juniper just a little while ago. Just say it. If it means something, it means something. If it doesn't, it doesn't. You're not always going to be right when you're trying to communicate to the spiritual world. That's another thing about those pushy psychics that think they're right about everything they're not, and I can't stand that. So yeah, I've strayed away from the technology and more so into just myself and into dowsing techniques. These days, I like to use a dowsing pendulum to communicate. So I guess there you go. There's my take on that.
What would be your number one rule for new investigators? Brand new, got an idea, they want to do this investigation thing. What would be your top 2 or 3 rules for that?
I'd say definitely to start with, don't go alone anywhere, especially an unfamiliar location or a location that has a background of having a nasty attachment to it. We're not necessarily talking about demonic or anything like that. Of course, you could run into that, but more so a place that has a violent history. And also learn how to protect yourself. And when I say protect yourself, I mean, pray or bring a cross or whatever it is. Those are just examples. Whatever it is that you believe in spiritually, metaphysically, learn how to protect yourself, and of course, learn how to ground yourself and get yourself out of the situation.
Those are awesome, awesome pieces of advice. They're ones that you will hear often from experienced investigators. So stay tuned. We are going to sign off here in just a moment for this particular episode. We'll be back next week with another investigator profile from the Paranormal Brain Trust. Thanks so much for joining us.
This episode copyright 2019 by astronetradio.com. All rights reserved.